I want to get started on producing a variety of different songs, but I don't want them to sound the same. So I'm going to go through this emotional exercise that is going to help me to form 5 different song ideas that have 5 different chord progressions and produce 5 different emotions. So I want my first song to have a chilled and relaxed vibe. And to do this, I'm going to use the F sharp minor scale and start on the 6, which is the D, go to the 1, which is the F sharp minor, then the 7, which is E minor, and then back to the 1. By the way, I'll pop the major scale alternatives on the screen for those that aren't aware of how minor scales work. So here's what that 6-1-7-1 scale sounds like. Alright, so after listening to that chord progression, I want to put some notes on top to give it some more character. And one way that I can fully achieve this kind of vibe is by creating the right atmosphere. And I do this using a pad, otherwise known as a drone, by holding on the 1, which in this case is the F sharp minor, and that's also known as the tonic. So let's listen to what that chord progression sounds like with the pad. You can see it creates this completely chill vibe that I was trying to achieve. What if I converted this chord progression into another instrument, such as a synth, and put some drums alongside it? Nice, so I've just got my first idea, which is sounding pretty good, and I'm going to move into my second idea. So for my second song idea, I want to go down a more cheerful and feel-good vibe. And to do this, I'm going to use the C minor scale. So if I start on the 6, which is the A flat, to the 3, which is E flat, 7, B flat, and 1, C minor. Don't forget the major scale alternative of this minor scale is available up here on the screen. Alright, let's listen to how that chord progression sounds. This is meant to be a feel-good track, so what I'm going to do to make it feel even better is move the 3rd note of each chord up an octave. And next I'm going to add in 2 pedal notes. Pedal notes are notes that remain throughout a chord progression. One on the E flat, which is the 3rd note of a minor scale, and the E flat is also the relative major of the C minor scale. Then I'm going to put another pedal note on the B flat, which is the perfect 5th of E flat, because it's 5 semitones or 5 half steps apart from that E flat. I have done a video on the circular fifths, but I'll be sure to add a link at the end of the video. Then I'll finish off the chord progression by adding an E flat note on top. Remember, E flat is the relative major of the C minor scale that I'm in. So let's see how that sounds. Now I'm going to bring the chords to life by adding in some drums, vocals and effects. Alright, I quite like that chord progression, so I'm going to stay in the same key of C minor, but I want to kind of create an uplifting vibe. So what I'm going to do is use some of the chords that I've just used in that previous track idea, but introduce one new chord. So what I'm going to do is rearrange those chords and add in that new chord to make it a little sadder. Start on the 6, which is the A flat, to the 1, which is C minor, to the 7, which is B flat, and then to the 5, which is G minor. So here is that progression. Now I'm liking these chords, are sounding pretty good. But what I'm going to do is the same as the previous track idea and move the 3rds of each chord up an octave. When the 3rds are on top of the 1 and the 5 of a chord, it just adds more character to a chord. And then I'll add a pedal note on the 3rd note of the scale, as I know that this worked well in the previous track idea. And then I'll add another pedal note 5 semitones above that. Alright, I'm quite happy with that chord progression and it's given me a solid basis for a new track idea. So what I'm going to do is move on to the next idea, which is creating a sad chord progression. I really want to tug on those heartstrings. So to create a sad chord progression, I'm going to use the scale of A minor and start on the 1, which is A minor, to the 7, which is G, to the 4, which is D minor, and then to the 6, which is F. So here's how that chord progression sounds. And And using the octave technique, I'll raise the third note of each chord up an octave, because this will add some character to the chords. Then to hit people right in the feels, I'm going to add a pedal note onto the tonic, or the root note, which in this case is the A minor. Oh man, now I need something to cheer me up. So I'm going to end with a happy chord progression now that we pulled on those heartstrings in the previous chord progression. This chord progression creates an uplifting and happy vibe. So I'm going to use the same key as the sad chord progression, which is A minor, just to show you how simple chord changes within a chord progression can change the emotion of a track completely. So the chord that this uplifting and happy chord progression starts on is the E minor, which is the 5. So from the 5 we then go to the 6, which is F, then the 7, which is G, then to the 1, which is E minor. And this is what that chord progression sounds like. Alright, because I'm in the key of A minor, that means the relative major of that is C major. So using the pedal note technique, I'm going to add a pedal note onto the relative major, which is C, and then add a note onto the perfect fifth of that relative major, which is G, because there are 5 half steps or semitones between C and G. This will help the chord progression to sound more joyful and happy. Then I'll also use the octave technique, which I showed you earlier, and raise the third note of each chord by an octave. So let's add a vocal to that to see what it'd sound like as a finished track.
Wasting away is true, but I like wasting time with you. Wasting
Nice.
away is true.
That's sounding pretty good already. Now that I have 5 track ideas that each have their own emotional vibe, I can develop them into completed tracks. I know I mentioned about the circle of fifths and major and minor scales and relative majors, relative minors within this video. If those aspects of this video was too much for you to handle, then I recommend checking out these 2 videos that will help you to progress your music theory further. Really? You're wanting more? Alright, well check out the link in the description and you can find out 17 things that I wish I knew before starting Logic Pro.